To truly understand Windows today, you have to go back to where it all began. Windows 1.0, 1985. Windows 1.0 was released in 1985, and it marked Microsoft's first serious attempt to change how people interacted with computers. Before this, users had to rely entirely on MS-DOS, where every action required typing commands. That system was powerful, but it was also intimidating and unforgiving. One wrong command could stop everything. Windows 1.0 didn't replace MS-DOS. Instead, it ran on top of it, acting as a graphical shell designed to make computers easier to use. For the first time, users could click icons instead of memorizing commands. Simple programs like Calculator, Paint, Notepad, and the Reverse game gave users a visual way to interact with their machines. However, Windows 1.0 was extremely limited. All windows were locked into a tiled layout and could not overlap, making multitasking awkward. There were no minimize or maximize buttons, and performance was unstable. Crashes were common, and the infamous blue screen errors already existed in primitive form. Another major issue was hardware. Windows required a mouse, but most users didn't own one yet, because MS-DOS worked perfectly with just a keyboard. As a result, many people ignored Windows 1.0 completely. Still, despite its flaws, this version planted a dangerous idea. Computers didn't have to be difficult. And that idea would change everything. Windows 2.0, 1987. If Windows 1.0 was Microsoft testing the water, Windows 2.0 was the moment they took a real risk. Released in 1987, this version quietly introduced one change that would define the future of Windows forever: overlapping windows. For the first time, programs could sit on top of each other instead of being locked side by side. That may sound normal today, but back then, it completely changed how people worked. Users could now write documents while referencing spreadsheets, switching between tasks without closing everything. This upgrade arrived at the perfect time, because Microsoft Word and Excel were starting to gain attention, turning Windows into a serious productivity platform. But this innovation almost destroyed Windows before it could grow. Apple accused Microsoft of copying the Macintosh interface and took them to court. The lawsuit threatened to kill Windows entirely. However, Microsoft defended itself by pointing out a critical detail. Apple had previously allowed Microsoft to use parts of its interface while developing software for the Mac. In the end, Microsoft won. That decision didn't just save Windows 2.0. It legally protected the overlapping window design that Windows still uses today. Despite being more powerful, Windows 2.0 was still unstable and unpopular with casual users. But behind the scenes, Microsoft had won something far more important than market share. They had secured the freedom to build Windows their own way. And the next version would prove just how powerful that freedom really was. Windows 3.0, 1990. By 1990, Microsoft was running out of second chances. Windows had survived lawsuits and criticism, but it still wasn't a true mainstream success. Windows 3.0 was the version that changed that story. Released at the perfect moment, it took advantage of the powerful Intel 386 processors, allowing Windows to finally run faster, smoother, and with more memory than before. This time, the interface looked noticeably better. It supported full-color graphics, cleaner icons, and a more polished design that made Windows feel modern instead of experimental. For the first time, using a computer actually felt intuitive. Windows 3.0 also allowed users to run heavier applications, including early design software like CorelDRAW, while multitasking more reliably. This wasn't just a visual upgrade, it was a technical leap forward. 2 years later, Windows 3.1 refined the experience even further by introducing drag-and-drop functionality. Instead of memorizing keyboard shortcuts, users could move files visually, making computers easier for everyday people to understand. This version marked a turning point. Windows finally broke out of offices and entered homes. Sales skyrocketed, software developers rushed in, and Microsoft suddenly became a dominant force in personal computing. But success brought pressure. Expectations were now higher than ever. And with the next version, Microsoft wouldn't just improve Windows, they would completely redefine how people interacted with computers. Windows 95, 1995. In 1995, Microsoft wasn't just releasing another operating system. They were making a statement. Windows 95 launched with massive hype, a global marketing campaign, and expectations that could have crushed the product instantly if it failed. But instead, it reshaped personal computing. The most important change was the introduction of the Start menu and taskbar, which organized programs, files, and system controls into one central place. This single design choice became so iconic that it's still used decades later. For users, Windows finally felt structured instead of confusing. Under the hood, Windows 95 also brought major technical improvements. Plug-and-play allowed hardware like printers, sound cards, and scanners to work automatically without manual driver installation. Before this, setting up hardware could take hours. Windows 95 also included Internet Explorer, quietly introducing users to the early Internet era. While it wasn't very stable at first, it opened the door to online browsing for millions of people. Despite its success, Windows 95 wasn't perfect. Crashes still happened, and performance depended heavily on hardware. But none of that mattered. This version transformed Windows from a tool for enthusiasts into something anyone could use. And once people experienced this level of simplicity, there was no going back. The pressure was now on Microsoft to keep improving, and the next version would try to do exactly that. Windows 98, 1998. By the time Windows 98 arrived in 1998, Windows 95 had already set a new standard. The challenge now wasn't innovation, it was refinement. Windows 98 focused on improving what users were already familiar with, especially as the Internet was becoming part of everyday life. One of its biggest upgrades was stronger integration with Internet Explorer, which made web browsing faster and more reliable than before. For many users, Windows 98 was their first real experience of the Internet at home. Another massive step forward was full USB support. Before this, computers relied on different ports for each device, which was confusing and limiting. Windows 98 simplified everything by supporting USB keyboards, mice, cameras, and storage devices, creating the foundation for modern plug-and-play hardware. It also introduced built-in dual monitor support, making it useful for professionals and gamers who needed more screen space. But Windows 98 carried a serious flaw: stability. Crashes were still common, and performance could be unpredictable. In one infamous moment, a live demonstration by Microsoft executives ended with a blue screen of death on stage. The incident became legendary and perfectly symbolized the problem. Windows 98 was powerful but fragile. Users loved its features, yet they were growing tired of instability. Microsoft was pushing forward fast, but something underneath Windows was starting to crack. And that problem would explode in the very next release. Windows Me, 2000. When Windows Millennium Edition launched in 2000, expectations were high. Home computers were more common than ever, and Microsoft promised a smoother, more user-friendly experience. But almost immediately, something felt wrong. Windows Me was unstable from the start. Simple actions like opening programs, installing drivers, or even shutting down the system could cause freezes or crashes. Performance was inconsistent, and many users felt like they were fighting the operating system instead of using it. Ironically, Windows Me introduced a feature that was meant to fix disasters: System Restore. This allowed users to roll their system back to a previous state if something went wrong after an update or installation. On paper, it was a brilliant idea. In practice, it often failed or restored the system incorrectly, making problems even worse. Driver compatibility was another major issue, especially with newer hardware entering the market. Unlike earlier versions, Windows Me was designed only for home users and was still built on the aging MS-DOS foundation. That decision proved fatal. As crashes continued and frustration grew, Windows Me quickly earned the nickname Mistake Edition. Trust in Windows hit one of its lowest points ever. Microsoft couldn't afford another failure like this. If Windows was going to survive, it needed a complete architectural reset. And that reset would arrive faster than anyone expected, with one of the most beloved versions of Windows ever released. Windows XP, 2001. After the disaster of Windows Me, Microsoft had no room left for mistakes. Windows XP, released in 2001, was more than just another upgrade. It was a rescue mission. For the first time, Microsoft unified its consumer and business operating systems under the Windows NT architecture. This single change made Windows dramatically more stable, secure, and reliable. Crashes became rare, startup times improved, and hardware detection finally worked the way users expected it to. Plug something in, and it usually just worked. Visually, Windows XP felt friendly and modern. The colorful Luna interface made computers feel less intimidating, especially for new users. But behind that appearance was serious power. Built-in CD burning simplified file sharing during a time when CDs were the dominant storage format. Networking became easier, gaming performance improved, and software compatibility was stronger than ever. Most importantly, Windows XP earned user trust. People relied on it daily, both at home and in offices, and many refused to upgrade even years later. XP stayed popular long past its official support period, which was almost unheard of. Microsoft had finally built an operating system people loved. But that success created a new problem. Expectations were now sky-high. And when Microsoft tried to push Windows forward again, the next version would remind everyone that progress always comes with risk. Windows Vista, 2007. When Windows Vista was released in 2007, Microsoft wanted to redefine what Windows could be. After the massive success of Windows XP, Vista was designed to feel futuristic. It introduced the Aero Glass interface, adding transparency, smooth animations, and 3D window effects that made Windows look visually impressive. On top of that, Vista introduced User Account Control, or UAC, a security system meant to protect users from malicious software by asking permission before critical system changes. But Vista's ambition quickly turned into its biggest weakness. The new Aero effects demanded far more system resources than most computers could handle at the time. As a result, many PCs ran painfully slow. Even worse, UAC prompts appeared constantly, interrupting users for the simplest tasks. While the feature improved security, its aggressive behavior made Windows feel annoying and restrictive. Driver compatibility also became a major issue. Many older devices simply didn't work properly, leading to crashes and frustration. Vista wasn't completely broken, but it arrived too early for the hardware of its era. Users compared it constantly to Windows XP and found it lacking. Trust began to slip again. Microsoft had pushed innovation too hard, too fast. And once again, they needed a recovery. The next version wouldn't try to impress users with flashy visuals. Instead, it would focus on fixing everything Vista got wrong. Windows 7, 2009. By 2009, Windows users were cautious. After Vista's struggles, many people were hesitant to trust Microsoft again. Windows 7 had one clear mission: fix Vista without breaking what already worked. From the moment it launched, it was clear this version was different. Windows 7 kept the beautiful Aero design but optimized it to run smoothly even on modest hardware. Performance was faster, boot times were shorter, and crashes became rare. For many users, Windows finally felt reliable again. Multitasking also improved significantly. The snap feature allowed users to drag windows to the edge of the screen to automatically resize them, making side-by-side work effortless. The redesigned taskbar made switching between applications quicker and more intuitive. A powerful search bar let users instantly find apps, files, and settings without digging through menus. These small improvements added up to a much smoother daily experience. Windows 7 didn't try to reinvent computing. Instead, it perfected it. Businesses adopted it quickly, home users loved it, and gamers praised its stability. For years, Windows 7 dominated the market and became the standard people compared every new version against. But technology never stops moving forward. Touchscreens were becoming popular, and Microsoft was preparing its boldest experiment yet. The next version wouldn't refine Windows. It would challenge everything users thought Windows was supposed to be. Windows 8, 2012. When Windows 8 launched in 2012, it immediately shocked users. Microsoft wasn't trying to improve Windows 7, they were trying to replace it. The familiar Start menu was removed and replaced with a full-screen Start screen filled with live tiles showing weather, news, and notifications. This design was built for touchscreens, as tablets and hybrid devices were becoming popular. On paper, the idea made sense. In reality, it felt completely wrong for desktop and laptop users. Navigation became confusing. Instead of clicking a Start button, users were forced into a tile-based interface that required horizontal scrolling. Important system controls were hidden behind gestures and screen corners, which made basic tasks frustrating with a mouse and keyboard. Performance was actually good, and crashes were rare, but usability suffered badly. People weren't upset because Windows 8 was broken, they were upset because it ignored how they actually used their computers. Microsoft tried to recover with Windows 8.1, bringing back the Start button and fixing some design issues. But the damage was already done. Windows 8 became a warning sign of what happens when innovation forgets the user. Trust was shaken once again. Microsoft needed a version that could satisfy both traditional PC users and modern device trends. And that balance would define the next era of Windows. Windows 10, 2015. When Windows 10 arrived in 2015, Microsoft admitted something without saying it directly: Windows 8 had gone too far. Windows 10 was designed to win back trust. The Start menu returned, blending the classic Windows 7 layout with modern live tiles from Windows 8. This made the system feel familiar yet updated. Performance improved across the board, and compatibility with older software helped ease the transition for businesses and longtime users. Windows 10 also introduced powerful productivity tools. Virtual desktops allowed users to separate workspaces for different tasks, reducing clutter. Task View made switching between open apps fast and visual. Microsoft also pushed Windows as a service, promising continuous updates instead of major version releases. At first, this sounded like the future. But that future came with frustration. Forced updates and unexpected restarts disrupted work, sometimes at the worst possible moments. Update screens would sit frozen at certain percentages, turning Windows 10 into an internet meme. Privacy concerns also surfaced as Microsoft collected more system data than before. Despite these issues, Windows 10 became massively popular and remained the dominant operating system for years. Microsoft had finally stabilized Windows again. But in doing so, they created a new question. If Windows 10 was supposed to be the final version, why was the company already preparing its successor? The answer would arrive in 2021, with a version that looked familiar, yet subtly different. Windows 11, 2021. When Windows 11 launched in 2021, the first reaction from many users was confusion. Microsoft had promised Windows 10 would be the last version, yet here was a brand new one. At first glance, Windows 11 looked familiar, but subtle changes immediately stood out. The Start menu was centered, icons were redesigned, and rounded corners gave the system a cleaner, more modern feel. Visually, Windows 11 felt calmer and more polished than its predecessor. Beyond appearance, Microsoft focused heavily on multitasking. Snap layouts allowed users to instantly organize multiple windows into predefined layouts by hovering over the Maximize button. This made working with documents, browsers, and presentations far more efficient. File Explorer introduced tab support, reducing window clutter and improving file organization. Under the hood, Windows 11 also improved security, but at a cost. Strict hardware requirements prevented many older PCs from upgrading, frustrating millions of users. Despite these improvements, Windows 11 didn't feel revolutionary. For many people, it felt like a refined version of Windows 10 rather than a major leap forward. In fact, even years after its release, Windows 10 remained more widely used. Windows 11 represents Microsoft's vision for the future: cleaner, safer, and more controlled. But the real question remains: will users fully embrace it, or will history repeat itself once again?